Adventures of Batman with Robin, Boy Wonder. Batman and Robin, dynamic duo against crime and corruption, whose real identities as millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne and his young ward Dick Grayson are known only to Alfred, the faithful butler. Ever alert, they respond swiftly to a signal from the police, and moments later, from the secret Batcave deep beneath Wayne Manor, they roar out to protect life, limb, and property as Batman and Robin, Cape Crime Fighters. Batman and Robin, scourge of Gotham City's kooky criminals. The Joker, clown prince of crime. The Penguin, pudgy purveyor of perfidy. And the cool, cruel Mr. Freeze. Watch out, villains. Here come Batman and Robin.
Welcome back, citizens, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here, and we're on the third to last episode of the Batman 68 Filmation series here. And again, this is looking like a really strong one here. Really looking forward to talking about it with my co-host who's been with me through this whole entire journey from 13th Dimension, the man himself, Mr. Dan Greenfield. Hey, Dan.
Hi, John.
So, yeah, we're back, and we're back with the final Mr. Freeze story. And you kind of teased at the end of the last episode that it's going out well.
Yeah, it is. It's a good episode. I've been very open about the fact that I like Mr. Freeze as a character quite a bit. I enjoyed all three of the Batman 66 episodes where Mr. Freeze was concerned. But I never really thought that he translated. I mean, as much as they used him on Filmation, I never really felt that it translated quite as well. They made him more of a thug as opposed to a villain with style. But I think that he improved as, in these last couple of episodes. The last Batcave podcast episode, we talked about the Christmas episode, the short, and he goes out here with a very entertaining two-parter.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, the story is called The Fiendishly Frigid Fraud by Dennis Marks.
A peaceful, warm, lazy day in Gotham City. Suddenly, in the middle of Gotham Park, an explosion of shattering force opens a gigantic crater in the middle of the park. And in the middle of the crater, a huge ball of ice. A few hours later, at the Gotham Reservoir, another explosive impact and another giant ball of ice. What's going on?
And we get the overview of the park. It's very simplistic, but,
yes.
When I try to explain Central Park to some people who don't understand the whole concept of a park in the middle of a metropolis, you think of parks, you think of more like suburbs and things like that. It's like, no, and it's this beautiful park surrounded by actual buildings, and it's sort of like a canyon in a way, like the way it's canyoned in. And I thought the simplistic drawing just really brought it to light in the opening.
It's funny, the part that struck me instead was the part where the ice meteor shows up in the dam, because I thought to myself, hey, that's Kensico Dam, which is all 10 minutes from where I live because of the way New York's water supply works. So I thought to myself, hey, there you go, Westchester County makes an appearance on Filmation.
Right. I thought, though, that the dam was going to be destroyed.
Me too. But hey, I'm glad it wasn't, because then my home would have gone along with it.
Right. We cut to the Batcave with a new background image. Because a lot of times we talk about the stock footage, whether it's the fighting or in the Batcave, it's like the two computers in the background as Batman and Robin are talking. We get this new background of the two of them working on something there with the lab and stuff before we switch to the more familiar one of the computers.
And it is really funky too.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's really. I thought, like, it jumped out at me. Also, I thought, is this out of Star Trek? And of course, the Filmation hadn't done its Star Trek cartoons yet.
No.
And I wondered if they ever ended up using that image. That because they like to reuse stuff all the time on Filmation. I thought that is a really cool image. It's this really colorful, very 60s kind of. That was one of the things. Actually, again, I talked about this last time when I watched the the Filmation episodes that involve the other superheroes. And I'm not really talking about Superman, and I'm not talking about Aquaman, because Aquaman is all, quote unquote, otherworldly because it's all underwater in the oceans. But like when they would show Hal Jordan's apartment or Barry Allen's apartment or whatever, it looked really like 1960s bachelor pad-ish. I really liked it. I thought that was really cool that they did that. This, of course, isn't bachelor pad-ish, but it's very 60s. The design sensibility of what they're showing inside the Batcave is very much 1960s, and I really liked it. It jumped out at me too, so I'm glad you also noticed it.
Oh yeah, no, and a short time later, there's another scene with Batman and Robin sitting down watching television in the Batcave.
Yeah.
It's nice. Yeah. Now, this all looks like the work of Mr. Freeze, but it isn't. In fact,
if people think I did it, then I say I shall take the credit, and we shall reap the rewards of that terror with the coolest crime wave ever. Cut me in on all TV network channels immediately. You have experienced a demonstration of my newest power, a force that I can direct to any point, at any time. So you are at my mercy, citizens of Gotham. I want all the riches you have to offer.
It's a bluff, Robin, and we'd better stop him before he can pull it off. Come on. We'll locate that refrigerated rascal through his TV interference beam.
If anyone tries to stop me, or you, dynamic duo, be warned, the total destruction of Gotham City, building by building, will be on your hands.
Well, he's nothing if not an opportunist.
yes.
But yes, these are a mysterious natural phenomenon, which I think is hysterical. These ice boulders just pop up and wherever they are, but there's no real explanation as to how it works. But that's the MacGuffin. The idea is that, Mr. Freeze, hey, if everybody thinks it's me, I might as well make it about me.
Right. And I like this because there's even that bit there where Freeze says he's got no idea how he's going to carry out his threat to destroy the city, but he's counting on the city not knowing that, and that they'll just give in.
Well, it reminds me of the Batman 66 episode, the first Penguin episode. The Penguin doesn't have an idea for his own scheme.
Right.
He relies on Batman to come up with it for him. He's like, I got an idea. Why don't we have Batman figure out something that we can steal that he won't be able to catch us, at. And that's the thrust of the episode. And similar here where Mr. Freeze is like, I don't know what we're going to do here, but I guess we're just going to roll with it, which I don't think the two are necessarily connected in the creator's minds, but that's what it reminded me of.
Right. Now, we get a brief scene with Gordon, and here's O'Hara again, who I don't think we've seen since the last big 2-part Freeze story.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if we talked about this before. Is this the only instance, other than the 66 series, where we have Commissioner Gordon without a mustache in a media outside the comic? Or medium, I should say. In a medium.
Medium outside the comic. Not that I can think of, because he had it. It was Pat Hingle had the mustache in the Burton and Schumacher movies, and of course Gary Oldman had the mustache. So yeah, I think this might be the only time he doesn't have a mustache.
Oh, wait a minute. No, actually, currently Gotham.
Oh right, of course.
Yeah,
Right,
I just realized that.
Yeah.
Because I think even in the 40s Batman serials, Gordon had a mustache.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So Batman tracks down the signal, and with the Batcopter, they're able to find.
Right. Other than Neil Hamilton, of course, Neil Hamilton.
Well, Neil Hamilton. Well, yeah. No, because that's one of the things that we always point out is that, look, like when they did the Batman Return of the Cape Crusaders, they slapped a mustache because they didn't want to even go close to Neil Hamilton or whatever. They sort of had that generic Jim Gordon that we see in a lot of these things. And it seems to be the pat way is that Gordon has a mustache.
Right. That's the shorthand, yes. But here he doesn't have the mustache, but he's got dark hair as opposed to the silver hair that Neil Hamilton had. And he's always wearing the glasses, whereas with Neil Hamilton, usually he wasn't wearing glasses, but he did wear them sometimes.
Right.
So That's kind of weird. But the voice that Ted Knight uses to be Gordon always sounds Neil Hamilton-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think he's written to be similar to Neil Hamilton, although Neil Hamilton really was just basically authority figure. He was a generic authority figure. Of course, on the show, they gave him a lot more to do. Here, he sticks to that, for the most part, that generic authority figure role, although occasionally he does kind of lapse into the more, like we were saying the last episode, where he was kind of despairing like Neil Hamilton's Gordon would when things really seemed dire.
Right. Now, Batman tracks the TV signal to Freeze's sub, and with the Batcopter, they're able to follow and find the sub. They use these things called the Bat Jammers, which are basically depth charges to get the sub to surface.
Yeah, this was right out of the 1966 movie.
Yes.
And I know that the 1966 movie, of course, that was a whole thing on, U-boat movies and what have you, and using, depth charges to get the sub to surface so that they could engage it and what have you. So it's the same exact thing that happens here. But I couldn't help but think, oh, great, this is just right out of the 1966 movie.
Yeah. Now, Freeze tricks the two of them to come aboard by claiming he's going to surrender, but instead he traps them in the sub, getting away himself in a mini sub he's got within the sub, and he lowers the temperature in order to freeze them. This
is right out of James Bond, by the way.
Yeah.
This isn't just a Batman 66 kind of style death trap. This is like, it's The Spy Who Loved Me. This is like Stromberg, but and Stromberg was basically a stand-in for Blofeld. But that's what it is. I mean, this one big sub, little sub. They slide down a tube to get into the little sub and try to get away. I love it. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Now, they do escape, though, just like they did in the last episode with Simon the Pieman. Via the torpedo tubes, Batman sends Robin out first, and then just at the nick of the what's the phrase I'm looking for? At the last moment,
the nick of time.
The nick of time, he shoots himself out. And this time we actually see both of them being shot out of the tube. It's not just, however it was before, they crawled out or whatever. They're shot out of the torpedo tube.
And it's cool. The sub itself explodes.
Right.
And and they escape by the skin of their teeth.
Right. Now, the thing is, though, is that my first exposure to anybody thinking you could possibly shoot a human out of a torpedo tube was $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is it even possible? I can't imagine it.
I doubt it. I mean, when you consider the pressures of the water and all.
Yeah, I can't imagine. But it's used. It's like quicksand. It's like one of these things that adventure characters always encounter. I mean, inevitably, when there's something that happens on a submarine in a cartoon or whatever, it's always like, oh, well, this is how they're going to escape. It's through the torpedo tube, and it's going to work. And it's fun though.
It's fun, but it's like, as a kid, I always thought it was just 6 Mil and Bionic Woman that did something crazy like that. Then I see it, and we're talking about the show 10 years earlier, and then it makes me wonder, what kind of story did we first see somebody thinking that's a possibility? I mean, that's something else. I know, for not entirely worthy of research, but it's interesting.
I think you're right there. Anyway, moving on.
Anyway, so the duo return to the Batcave, where Alfred greets them with, I guess, warm tea or something to warm them up, and he gives them the news of another meteor expected to fall in the kids' park.
And Batman's response is, and Robin, they're like, what?
Yeah, I love that.
Completely oblivious, which is kind of funny. It's like, usually they're on top of everything, and you'd think that they would have heard about it on their way back to the Batcave, through the Batmobile or wherever, however they got back. Batcopter, I guess, maybe.
Right.
But yeah, they're completely like stunned. They're like, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's well timed with the two of them saying it simultaneously.
Yeah, exactly.
So they race there in the Batmobile and find Freeze just leaving the scene of the hoax he's created, because what he did was he blew up the ground and then filled it with an ice ball.
And this is really nice. This is actually a really nice, what wasn't clear to me until now, that this whole thing, usually the gag, or often the gag with Mr. Freeze, is that his shenanigans come up in the summertime, because they use that as a way to show just how shocking his powers are, or his scientific, prowess is, I guess. that he could freeze the city at the hottest point in the year. I mean, even going back to the original Mr. Freeze episode on Batman 66, when Gordon gets the call about what happens when Mr. Freeze shows up, he goes, "In July?" That's always like the thing. It always seems to happen in warm weather. Here, the last episode's a Christmas episode notwithstanding. Here, I guess it's wintertime, because when they chase him, it's like these really nice wintry scenes with mountains in the background. And this is, again, I'm always going on about the matte paintings, but this really looks nice because you not only have like the snowy, landscape, you have the mountains in the background, but the color of the sky in the background is like a real winter sky, a late afternoon winter sky with the dark blues and the oranges. It's really lovely work, and it's the kind of thing that if you're not really paying attention that you could really take for granted. This is where I really love the artistry that goes into Filmation that sometimes gets lost because of the whole overall schlocky nature of what it is that they were doing.
Right. And like you said, they go onto this ice bridge. They're following after him.
It's great. Yeah,
it is.
He's building it as he goes across.
Yes.
He's shooting his freeze ray ahead of his ice cream truck so that he can get across this chasm, and basically he's building his truck. He's building his bridge as he goes. And again, this is one of those things that they can't really do on the TV show, or the live action show. They could never do that. This is where the animation comes into play. And yes, you could do it in a comic book too, but it works really well as an animated thing because it's easy to show, and it's a really cool device. It's a really cool idea.
And I want those tires.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But
he sees they're catching up, so he has dynamite thrown onto the bridge, which he's going to explode.
Great Lucifer! That's a lighted stick of dynamite.
He's gonna blow up the ice bridge. They're coming right at the dynamite, and they can't stop.
How can the Cape Crusaders save themselves from the destruction at the hands of the foul, fiendish Mr. Freeze? Don't miss the crashing climax of this exciting story coming up next.
Everybody doesn't like something, but nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee. Everybody doesn't like something, but nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee. Everybody doesn't like something, but nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee. But nobody doesn't like Sarah Lee.
If I never laced another skate, it would be too soon. That's winter. It's filled and snow and cold and wet. I don't fuss over them too much, but I do try to see that they eat right, at least while I'm watching. I make sure they take their one-a-day multiple vitamins. Then at least I know they're getting all the vitamins they normally need to take. One a day. It's our family vitamin insurance for all seasons.
When an astonishing atmospheric phenomenon bombards Gotham City with ice meteors, the cool, cruel Mr. Freeze runs a bluff and, to demonstrate that he controls the ice fallout, fakes the frigid phenomenon with explosives and his freeze ray. Then, when the dynamic duo give chase, Mr. Freeze tries to escape over his do-it-yourself ice bridge with the duo in blistering pursuit. And the result is dynamite.
Another inch or two.
Yes, that was close. Now we've got to find that frigid fiend again.
I love the exclamation from Batman, "Great Lucifer."
yeah, weird, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. Great Lucifer. I love stuff like that. But also that's a case where the Batman, and this is the other side of it, where the animation is really wonky, where the Batmobile is coming from a distance and coming toward the camera where the dynamite is, and it's a really neat idea for the direction. But the animation is so poorly done that the Batmobile kind of basically, they really screw up the perspective, because the Batmobile kind of appears in the distance and then it just kind of comes toward the screen And the idea of what they're doing is really cool, but the animation is so clunky that it actually makes you laugh when you see it. I remember, I went back to go watch it a second time because I'm like, man, that is really, really strangely animated. But I like the idea of what it was that they were trying to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, that one didn't work as well.
No.
Now, part 2 opens, and it's a quick. Yeah. It kind of reminded me of the old Batman and the other serials where, you would actually see them fall off the cliff. But in the next episode, you clearly see that they jump off. Because you were talking about the perspective. At the end of part 1, the explosions start happening as the Batmobile is right. Like, to me, it's like, okay, there you go. They should be done. But no. We stopped.
Right. And when they come back from commercial, you notice that the animation isn't quite the same. In the second one, it appears that they were not. They show it, and it doesn't look like that they came up right on it.
Right.
They start the explosion a little bit earlier, but you could still see the Batmobile through the explosion. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but the first time around, it looks like there's no way that they would have escaped it. In the second one, it's like, okay, that looks different. And then, of course, they show the Batmobile backing out of the smoke.
Right. Exactly. Now, while they're backing off, we get another Gordon and O'Hara scene.
The worst has happened, Chief O'Hara. An ice meteor has just been reported to have crashed. Exactly where Mr. Freeze predicted it would.
Well, now, that appears to remove any doubt that the frigid, felonious Freeze can do what he says.
But Batman says it's a bluff.
Tell that to my men. They won't lay a glove on Freeze. Not with the threat of wiping out all of Gotham hanging over them.
There is no threat. It is a bluff.
The Caped Crusaders,
But how can we prove that, Batman?
Let's all visit the Dilworth Observatory.
where Professor Dilworth himself will confirm the fact that Freeze is a phony, frigid fraud.
The thing is this. If they knew where the meteor was going to land in advance, why didn't they set something up to observe it?
Same thing. I was thinking the same exact thing. That's a real Filmation logic issue. If he says it's going to be here, why didn't they go there immediately? Why did they wait and then come find out later? Oh yeah, I guess it showed. I guess he was right. You know, yeah. It was. That's kind of a mess up.
It is. And Batman shows up, and he wants to prove to the two it's all a hoax. So he's going to bring them to the observatory for a science lesson with Professor Dilworth.
Yeah, who, by the way, looks like H.G. Wells. Mm-hmm. Because they're whenever they show professors on Filmation across the board, they're always vaguely rumpled and harried-looking older guys.
Yes.
In this case, he looks like that and more because he looks like he's wearing 19th century clothes.
Yeah. I liked him though because sure. Although he doesn't have a huge role here, he does point out how the meteors came from space and it's this whole phenomenon and such. But his science lesson is interrupted when Free shows up and a huge bat fight breaks out.
Take them, boys!
You want the world, Freeze? Here!
I mean, huge. It goes on for a while.
Yeah, it does.
Glad to meet you, fellas.
This is the right place to see stars. Be the first man on Mars.
And up to the moon with you.
Okay, Cape Creep, now you get yours.
Sorry, I didn't plan it that way.
Time he was brought back to Earth.
Hold that pose, Boy Wonder.
And I like it because it reminds me of, and I was saying this last episode that we were talking, where I was talking about wanting to do a story about the 13 best Batman bat traps from the TV show, the 66 show. This one reminds me of one of the absolute best of them because in the Zodiac Crimes,
yes,
when the Joker Penguin, and one of the absolute best traps is when Batman and Robin are under the boulder or the meteor. And they've got it set up that they've got this display of all the different planets, and if the thermite comes around and touches the rope, it's going to burn them, and the whole thing is going to fall on them, and they're going to die. It reminded me of that.
Yes.
I love that. You have them, punch it, Batman punches one of the guys and they land on Mars, and Robin punches the other and he lands on the moon, and the visuals of it, the creativity of it, it's a good bat fight. I like it a lot.
It is, and the puns.
Yeah.
Tons of astronomical puns. Reminded me so much of the comic books.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But despite all that and the fact that they're doing well in the fight, freezes the group of them. Batman, Robin, the two, and the Professor. They're all knocked out. And they should be frozen for about, according to Mr. Freeze, 2 weeks.
Right. As if they would survive that long, but yes.
Right, exactly. But very quickly after they leave, we see Batman, I don't know how, but he manages to sort of teeter-totter himself towards a thin beam of light that's coming through the observatory dome.
Yeah, this part gets again not to overthink these things, but
right.
Yeah, his he's able to somehow wiggle his way over, and I guess he freezes his hand.
Right.
And not freeze, but freeze, Frees, freeze his hand. And he's able to tilt, I guess, the heat beam so that it thaws them all out.
Yes, exactly. But it does take time. I mean, it takes time for the hand to melt, and then for him to melt, and then get the others to melt. So during this whole time, Mr. Freeze goes on a crime spree.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Robbing various stores and such and what have you. But once they're all free, Batman points out how he bugged one of the goons, and they listen in on the fact that they're taking a plane and flying away. So he has the Professor train the lenses of the observatory on the plane, heating it up. It kills the freezing unit on it, and it forces the plane to come down.
Yeah, that's Mr. Freeze's Achilles heel, is the temperature. If you can make it warm enough for him, you're going to disable himself.
Exactly.
That's pretty much this on a little bit larger scale.
And since he is disabled, he's got no choice but to give himself up, because there's just, it's either that or die, because he doesn't have his unit.
No, exactly.
Yeah. But he is captured, and the end scene where we get some of the worst forced laughter in the entire series, I think.
Yes.
Alfred, please put this in a position of honor in the Bat Museum.
Gladly, sir. May I serve dessert now?
And how? What are we having?
In honor of the occasion, I prepared some frozen custard.
Frozen? Well, okay. Why not?
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. This, it's not even a bat taunt. It's a
right,
and it's terrible. It's really awkward and it's really forced.
Yeah. But overall, I got to agree with you. Yes, this has to be the best one overall. It even beats, and I said last episode that the Christmas one was the best, but this one was the best overall. They went out at least high with Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, particularly the first half. And I have found this to be the case with some of the two-parters especially, is that they sometimes start out stronger than they finish.
Right.
It's like they have a really good idea or a really good plot line, but then the follow-through doesn't necessarily always work.
Correct.
I could chalk that up to any number of things. But here I felt like the second half kind of wandered a little bit, or at least just kind of finished softly. But overall, I thought it was a good episode. And for the first time between this and the Christmas episodes, I was kind of perfectly fine with Mr. Freeze. I wasn't as annoyed. Annoyed was too strong a word, but I never fully accepted the version that Filmation gave us. But these two, I think, are perfectly fine episodes, and I think Mr. Freeze is a perfectly fine villain in terms of the way he's characterized in both of them.
Right. Yeah. The whole thing with two parts, a lot of times, I mean, it's not the case here because it's all written for one episode, but a lot of these two-parters, a lot of times, whether they're season finales or, just over 2 weeks, you're right. I think they set themselves up with a great idea. I can think of Star Trek The Next Generation, the first time the Borg are there. I didn't care for the ending very much.
Sure.
Hell, $6 Million Man, the Bigfoot episode. There's this huge build-up, and the first episode is so exciting, and then it's kind of watered down with the second part.
But I wasn't really speaking in that way in terms of broad strokes. Like Batman 66, I wasn't thinking that, or other shows, but specifically to Filmation. I do think that a lot of times they're their follow through isn't as good as their setup.
Right.
In this case, I think that is the case, but it still doesn't matter because overall it's still such a good episode. I like this one.
Yeah. Now, that leads us to our one-parter, and it's, again, a Filmation original. I'm going to start off by saying this should have been a two-parter.
Yeah, I think they could have gotten more out of it, and it is another case where even though this is a one-parter, it starts off better than it finishes.
Yeah.
But this is, and I mentioned, we talked about this in the last episode when we were talking about Simon the Pie Man and how he would have been a good villain for, Alan Grant and John Wagner and Norm Brayfogle to tackle.
Mm-hmm.
The Judge is another one of those.
Yes.
Because this guy is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this isn't just a case where he's just a villain. This guy's unhinged.
Yeah.
And there's something really menacing about him beyond with the exception maybe of Catwoman. Mostly the villains on Filmation, they may be bad guys, but they're also kind of buffoons. The Judge isn't really a buffoon. I mean, he's got violent tendencies. He's got a big plan. I remembered watching this the first time just a couple of years ago. I don't remember this one from when I was a kid. And I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But in watching it in preparation for this, when I really sat down and watched it, I thought there's a really good idea for a character here. Mm-hmm. It's a gimmick. I'm not sure how much storytelling potential there is in it. And of course, in the comic books, the villain with the courtroom shtick is Two-Face usually.
Right.
But I really liked this little bit of an episode, and I thought that there was some potential there with the Judge. So it's another case where they came up with a character who I think would have translated well to other interpretations.
Well, also, if you think about it, this is his origin story.
Right, which you almost never see on these shows.
No, they're just already established.
Yeah, he's just some guy who's on Satan's Island.
Yes.
And he attacks the Judge and might have killed him.
Yeah.
Because, you can start with the recap. I don't want to jump ahead.
Well, the episode's called Enter the Judge. It's written by Dennis Marks.
Who's this guy you're checking through the Bat computer, Batman?
A notorious international criminal who's up for pardon on Satan's Island. Far too dangerous to release.
Satan's Island, the last remaining island prison in the world, which once a year is visited by a circuit judge who hears cases of prisoners coming up for pardon.
Even from the very beginning, I thought this one was a little darker than usual. Like you mentioned, the killing. Now, I didn't think of that, but it was a possibility. We cut to the island, and the guy is never named.
Right.
We don't get his
name.
No, but he is denied parole thanks to Batman's work on the Bat computer. So he flies into a rage. He lunges at the Judge, and in the confusion, as the guards are trying to grab him, he manages to switch the Judge's gavel with one of his own. So when the Judge hits it, it explodes. And yeah, like you said, that could have just killed him for all we know.
We don't know because all we do is we see the Judge knocked out.
Right.
We don't see any blood or anything because they would never show blood. But they don't, usually the shorthand for this sort of thing in cartoons is they show the explosion and all the bodies land in the water, and then they show everybody swimming away. They would always make sure to show that the villains had not been killed or the bystanders had not been killed.
Right.
Here, they don't show that at all. They don't show him waking up. They just show him prone, slumped over his judge's, his bench. And then it cuts away to whatever the villain Judge is going to do next. We don't know if he's alive or not.
Right. And not only that, it's and this is where you're saying, like, there's something crazed about this guy. In all the confusion, he runs over and takes the Judge's wig and robes.
And it's so creepy.
Yeah.
It is really creepy. I don't know why it is, but it is.
What it's like, we got to get away. Go get your own robes later. No, he takes the robe and the wig. It's weird.
It is weird, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the next day, we see Batman and Robin attending the trial of the Cosgrove gang because Batman wants Robin to learn everything about the law. And again, that's a nice little touch from, like, 66 there, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Now, there's a case book on the gang. It's pretty thick, and it's well labeled on the Judge's bench. it explodes. Now, this time, though, we can clearly see it's just a smoke bomb. Because in the confusion, the gang make their escape thanks to our new judge, the man who escaped from Satan's Island.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And we cut to his hideout, which we don't really see the exterior. We only see the interior, and it's just dark except for some creepy, half-melted candles lighting the place. And, it reminded me, it's kind of funny, I don't know why, but it reminded me of the Batman radio drama. It wasn't like a regular series. It was actually part of the Superman adventures, where Batman and Superman teamed up. But eventually Batman also had a group of kids who had a club, and they would hold meetings. And I just picture the kids in the same little shack, holding their meeting, because there's the judge at his bench, which is made of wood. Then he's got a jury of, something like 4 guys that he's picked up. Yeah. And he's telling them they're going to go out and rid Gotham City of crime fighters. But one of his jurors points out that they need 12 to make a jury.
Right. Yeah, the whole thing is really seedy. It reminds me of more like a Hammer film.
Yeah.
It's a kind of shadowy, and it's cobwebby, and it is. It's really ramshackle. So the whole thing just seems corrupt. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think of, judges are supposed to anyway. There's supposed to be a sense of decorum and a sense of high-mindedness. But this is just like it's grim and dark, and within the confines of Filmation, however dark Filmation can go. But compared to other, whether it's hideouts or other villains, this is definitely a step lower than we usually see. So there's something really, like I said, something really corrupted about the nature of the judge here that really gives this whole episode and this villain a greater sense of menace than we typically would get from even, say, the Joker or the Riddler.
Right, yeah. So he's going to need to free more criminals in order to make up his 12.
Right, yeah, and he's well aware of it, too. It's part of his plan.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. That's the only thing that's so disappointing with this, because this should have been the 2-parter. I would have liked a little more of, why did he suddenly take on the persona of the judge? He fits into it nicely. He hits all the notes as far as what he needs to be the judge, but why?
Right. I mean, even on the 66 show, they gave a reason for King Tut for becoming King Tut.
Exactly. Yeah.
Another batch of criminals escaped from a courtroom.
Some mastermind is behind this. We need help from the Bat-computer. Come on.
Now, a bus bringing new prisoners to the state prison meets what appears to be legal opposition.
Out of the way, you kook. We gotta deliver these prisoners. I hereby grant all of the prisoners in that bus my own personal pardon. Hey, what?
You were right. The man who calls himself the judge is the escaped criminal from Satan's Island.
Now, before we bring Batman and Robin to trial for crimes against criminals, we need money to finance our operations. Who is the richest man in Gotham City? Millionaire Bruce Wayne.
I wonder why they never gave him a name.
I don't know.
It is weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, he also could have given a line to say that he was a corrupt lawyer or he was something. I don't know. Maybe there was something that was keeping them from doing that. They just made him a guy who becomes the judge. And you're right. They should have given some kind of backstory, and they could have done it in 2 sentences easily, but for whatever reason they chose not to.
Yeah. So at Wayne Manor, Bruce sends Dick ahead to the Batcave when they hear a knock at the door. So he and Alfred meet with the judge. Well, actually, it's not Alfred, it's Bruce. But the judge has a statue of Justice, which Bruce handles, and he's electrocuted by it. Nice touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then, of course, Alfred touches Bruce, and he's electrocuted.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They both get knocked out.
Bruce is taken away as Robin comes on. And I'm thinking, wow, he comes in as Robin. I guess, well, if he's down in the Batcave and he hears a commotion up above, then he comes back. Yeah. So then he heads out in the Batmobile.
Right, yeah, because he can drive.
And I love this because, for a little while here now, it's Robin's show.
Yes, exactly, for a little bit. But I do like how during the pursuit, this I couldn't help but be reminded of the movie Airplane. Because what Robin does to decoy the judge and his jury, I guess, is that he's got for some reason he points this is a really rare defense mechanism that we use, as part of our crime fighting, and he turns on the Bat Dummy.
Right.
Which is basically a Batman blow-up doll that sits in the passenger seat, and it just cracks me up because they draw him like a dummy. He's got this big balloon head,
yes,
and his balloon body, and it's just a really funny sight gag.
Which, again, and I know they weren't looking at the 66 series, but they did have an inflatable Batman dummy with King Tut.
Yes, exactly.
So he inflates the dummy, again, to protect Bruce's identity as he forces the truck off the road, and Bruce is thrown from the judge's vehicle.
Yeah, Bruce keeps getting it backwards and forwards in this episode.
Yeah, he does. Robin places him in the Batmobile and has it sent back to the Batcave by remote control.
Yes, I like
nice.
that.
Yeah.
But now...
Got him, Judge!
Go, Batman, go!
Too bad. We lost a millionaire. But I'm sure a boy wonder must be worth something. Take him back to our court. You have heard the charges against you, boy wonder. Have you anything to say in your own defense?
Why don't you knock off this farce, you phony?
Overruled. Gentlemen of the jury, what is your verdict? Guilty. Excellent. I shall now pass sentence.
This whole thing here is just freaky because, again, like you said, there's that whole seediness, the darkness, and there's Robin tied to a pole back at their hideout, and the judge holds trial where they find Robin guilty.
Of course. Yeah. Show trial. Yeah. Show trial.
Actually, I was thinking about it now as you were just saying it there about it also kind of reminded me a little bit of an EC comic with some of the darkness.
Oh,
as far as the drawings.
Yeah, I mean the whole thing just has there's a decrepit underbelly to the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's found guilty. He's sentenced to death by being pressed in a giant metal book.
which is weird.
Yeah.
And we've seen this before in Batman 66, but yeah, it's kind of a strange thing for him to be sentenced to, but the whole thing is strange, so be it.
Right. But Batman manages to show up in the nick of time. He's not able to free Robin, but he is able to suggest that Robin use his laser to burn his way out of the book.
Right. And he does, and then when they show his face, he's got this happy grin on his face.
Yes. and he makes the joke. He says, "I'm a bookworm."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
A brief bat fight breaks out, and it is brief because it's the one-parter, and they quickly capture the judge and his men.
Yeah. Case closed.
Case closed, but it's interesting to see, because I don't remember if the judge actually fought in the bat fight, but when he shows up in court, he's got his arm in a sling.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
Never mind the gag, which to me I'm like thinking, isn't that going against his rights while he's in court? He should be allowed to speak.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
I couldn't believe it. I said, "What? They taped his mouth shut? This is not due process."
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Holy kangaroo court, Batman.
Right.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Oh, ho! He can't speak to his own defense. Ha ha! We've got him gagged. Ha 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 ha! Civics, kids.
Civics.
I'm like, well, wait a minute. What kind of lesson are they trying to teach kids about jurisprudence? He's guilty. We get that, but let him mount his defense. That's the American way to. I couldn't. That was so strange that they did that.
Right.
And they were joking about it. They're like, oh, I'm like, holy trampling on human rights, Batman.
Right.
Holy, it's just, yeah. Again, they're not really. I mean, that's not the point of any of this stuff. I get it, but it is really, really strange that they did that.
It gives new meaning to the term gag order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Unbelievable. I watched that too, and I was slack-jawed. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I gotta say, really, like, one of my favorites in this whole series, again, another solid villain that Filmation creates Just a shame that the format and the timing didn't allow for better development.
Yeah, I mean, I think as the series went on, obviously, I can't say obviously because maybe this wasn't it, but I'm going to project here and say that the creators were probably bored with writing the same villains over and over again, because we did have that glut in the middle of our talking about all these episodes where it was the same characters over and over again, and maybe they would change the combinations of in terms of the team ups. But and you know, look, you always want to see the Riddler and the Joker and the Penguin and Catwoman. You always want to see those villains anyway, but there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, because it starts to get a little samey. And you know, even though we had some really great episodes in there that we've talked about, there were also some in there that weren't that great. As we get toward the end here, you know, they were doing things that were off the typical track by giving us more Simon the Pieman and giving us, you know, the Judge, and we had the Christmas episode thrown in as well. And they finally started to get their bearings with Mr. Freeze. That it's unfortunate that there were only, you know, 17 episodes of There were 17 episode groups, I guess, of Filmation, because I would have liked to see what they would have come up with next, because they wanted to create new villains.
Yes.
And clearly they were, you know, as time went on, they were willing to kind of step out of their comfort zone a little bit and do some different things, and we're seeing that here. Right.
So, okay, that comes to the end of another episode of the Batcave podcast here with 2 solid stories.
Yes.
Hopefully we can say that about the next one. But before we talk about the next one, Dan, 13th Dimension, I'm guessing that there'll be something about the Judge there, won't there?
Oh yeah, I'll definitely find something to write about the Judge. Yeah, we've got what we typically do at 13th Dimension, you know, writing about Batman and vintage Batman and modern Batman. But Batman is only a small part of, you know, actually that's not true. Batman's a big part of what I do. But we write about everything, you know, Marvel, DC, independent comics, Comics Now, Comics Then, TV, movies. I would imagine that your listeners are probably familiar with us by this point, but come check us out. And we've been doing a lot of Batman 66 stuff lately, because we've got the Archie meets Batman 66 comics that we've been writing about. And also we've been featuring at the site a bunch of stories about an anonymous collector who has amassed an incredible array of original Batman 66 costumes and props, and we've been showing that off at 13th Dimension. So if you're unfamiliar with that, or even if you are familiar with that, come check us out, because we've got some good stuff going on that I think that listeners to this podcast would really dig.
Very cool. And that's 13thdimension.com.
Yep, and Facebook and Twitter too. Now,
next time, speaking of villains we like to see coming back and all, we're getting a double dose of the Riddler.
Yeah, and we're in for a treat.
Okay, good. As we come to the penultimate episode of the Filmation series. So stay tuned, citizens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So until next time, folks, thank you so much for listening. Once again, Dan, everyone, take care.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening, chums. I don't have a bat phone, but you can contact the Batcave podcast through its Facebook page, Twitter, email at thebatcavepodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast via libsyn.com. That's libsyn.com. Or through iTunes. The Batcave podcast is part of a series of pop culture podcasts from the Chronic Rift Network. Find them at chronicrift.com. So until next time, citizens, same bat time, same Batcave podcast.